How's it going, guys? Landon here with LMR.com, and Project Green Bean has reached stage 3 of the build, which primarily covers rear suspension components and finishes off with the exhaust. This one did take up some time, but for the most part, everything went together extremely well. On that note, let's check it out. First and foremost, if you guys haven't seen the intro, stage 1 or stage 2 of the build, be sure to get those videos underneath your belt. Those can be viewed by clicking the links in the video description. We kicked off stage 3 by removing the factory catback, since the mid-pipe was already removed in stage 1 to allow for installation of our Flowmaster headers. The factory catback can be removed in whatever fashion you so choose. You can use a sawzall and cut the piping just in front of the axle, or unbolt it and route it down and around the axle. I can promise you the easiest way is cutting the old junk free with a sawzall. Once we had our catback out of the way, we could address the upper and lower control arms, as well as prep for the Team Z anti-roll bar. Removal of the upper and lower control arms is very straightforward. You simply support the rear end underneath the center section or by the axle tubes. Either way is fine. We remove the lower shock bolt first to make it easier to remove our stock springs. Then we remove the sway bar, allowing us to ditch the factory stamped lower control arms. In their place went Team Z's tubular lower control arms that are even double adjustable to cater to multiple suspension setups. We opted for the control arms without sway bar mounts because we're going with the anti-roll bar. If a sway bar is something you want to still utilize, Team Z makes the same exact tubular control arm with sway bar mounts. Moving along, we threw Team Z's rear drag race springs in place of the factory stockers. Lowering springs are very straightforward, and the only thing to be mindful of is the lower pigtail. Make sure it's centered and towards the rear of the lower control arm. With the rear end still supported, out came the factory stamped upper control arms. Those were followed by removal of the stop upper axle bushings. The Maximum Motorsport rear upper axle bushing tool was an absolute lifesaver. Since the factory rubber bushings are press fit, this tool allows the bushing to be pressed out of the axle housing while the rear end is still in the car. There are other methods to this, like heating it up with a torch or using an air chisel. Instead of going about it the messy way, we made life simple and used the Maximum Motorsports tool. Up next, we prep for the Team Z upper control arms. There really isn't a science behind this one, guys. The solid axle bushings are slip fit, so they slide right into the axle housing with very little effort. When doing that, make sure you align the upper control bridge together and that the two pieces slide into each other properly. Now position the body portion of the upper arm into place and tighten it down. We left the length alone for now, since we were going to address the pinion angle once everything was installed. Now for the Team Z anti-roll bar. This one by far requires the most work because of the welding that's needed. Make sure the flat pieces are centered on the rear frame rails and then clean the area. Before tack welding them into place, grind down the area to prep for the welds. Hold the anti-roll bar in place and then make a few marks. Now you can tack weld the anti-roll bar into place. If everything is squared up and centered, go ahead and weld every edge that can be accessed with a welder. Once finished, prep the axle tubes for the tabs. Weld them into place and then tighten the hardware. You can adjust this once everything is buttoned up. Lastly, don't forget to shoot a couple coats of rust prohibited paint to prevent rust and corrosion. One key fitment note I would like to point out is that this roll bar will clear tailpipes that are up to 3 inches in diameter. A beefier version of the same anti-roll bar is available, but will require a side exit or dumped exhaust. Also make note of the end lengths. We adjusted them to 6 3/8 inches center to center. That measurement, of course, will differ depending on your setup. Finishing off the rear suspension is Strange Engineering's 10-way rear adjustable shocks. This matches the fronts perfectly and will provide plenty of adjustability to get Green Bean dialed in at the track. Once all of your suspension is tidied up, go over everything one more time just to double check yourself. Now that the suspension is finished off, we can address our Bassani mid-pipe and the Flowmaster American Thunder catback. The Bassani mid-pipe went on without any issues whatsoever. Thanks to the 5-piece design, adjustability and installation was absolutely effortless. That was then followed up with Flowmaster's iconic American Thunder catback, which, like any Flowmaster part, installed very easily. The catback does feature the crowd favorite Super 40 series mufflers, so this setup paired with the headers and the Bassani off-road mid-pipe should really wake up Green Bean and should sound really well. Well, fellas, that'll wrap things up for stage 3. To stay up to date with the project, be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. And of course, everything mentioned in this particular stage can be purchased over at LMR.com until the next installment on Green Bean, guys. If you have any questions, be sure to drop us a comment. And you know what to do by now. Keep it right here with the real Mustang enthusiasts, LMR.com.